Hey everybody, we're going to do a quick overview of the seminar on Sunday, very quickly. Then we're going to answer questions that were emailed or text to us. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about private coaching, and you can decide if that's right for you. But next week we will continue our conversation on digestion, and next week we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about some genetic polymorphisms. These are genes that we all have that can affect things like the way you metabolize fat, how it affects your ability to do things like convert beta-carotene into retinol, which are, remember we talked a lot about fat-soluble vitamins this past week. So there are genes that will influence things like vitamin D and B12 and all this stuff, and we'll talk very specifically about that. And do you need to get a 23andMe test to do something about this stuff? No, not necessarily. You can actually figure this out on your own. We can explain to you what to look out for and whether or not you're most likely to have these genes or not. So that'll be the focus of next week. But we will continue mostly on digestion. So this past week we talked about fat-soluble vitamins and how if you are overweight, if you have type 2 diabetes, you are extremely likely to be having difficulty assimilating vitamin A, D, E, K1, and K2. We talked about what all those vitamins do, and we talked about how you're sort of between a rock and a hard place with some of these vitamins, because if you have fatty liver disease, which about 70 million Americans have, you're in a difficult position between not having enough vitamin A and having too much vitamin A. And we will get to some questions and answers about vitamin A and carotenoids and things of that nature in a few minutes. So we also talked about stomach acid, we talked about pancreatic enzymes, we talked about bile and the health of the liver and the pancreas and how important these things are in order for your body to optimally assimilate not only fat-soluble vitamins, but also B12. And although we didn't talk about it this past seminar, even things like, all those omega-3 oils, those fish oils that you guys are spending so much money on, it includes those as well. And maybe we'll touch on that stuff this week. We'll talk about the difference between some of these longer-chain fatty acids and short-chain fatty acids and why they're so important in digestion. And that would be a good topic for us to cover this week as well. So let's get to some of the Q&A stuff. The one came in that had to do with the supplement timing, which is a great question. When should you take your supplements? Should you take them in the morning? Should you take them at night? Jordan, why don't you talk a little bit about the timing of supplements and what supplements are in general a good idea to take in the morning or at night, or does it not matter?
For the most part, I would say that vitamins and minerals and stuff, it doesn't really matter too much if you take them in the morning or at night. There's a couple of exceptions to that. For example, magnesium is one that's good to take at night. So if you're taking both, let's say calcium and magnesium, maybe take the calcium in the morning, take the magnesium at night. In terms of supplement timing, is that also including like between meals and?
Yeah. You can talk about it.
Yeah. So you generally want to take your minerals on an empty stomach if possible, because they will compete for absorption with other minerals in the food. Things like oxalates, phytates that are anti-nutrients in the food can also interfere with their absorption. So you want to try to take those on an empty stomach if you can. The fat-soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, K, and K2, you want to take those with fatty meals because the fat will help you assimilate these vitamins better. You want to generally, if you're taking a lot of different minerals, you want to try to space them out. You don't want to take like your zinc and iron together. You don't want to take your copper and zinc together. You want to try to space them out, take them between meals, and try to take only the fat-soluble vitamins with meals.
So let's separate this out a little bit. Mm-hmm. So some of you have asked about the competition of certain minerals. So Jordan just gave an example of copper and zinc. These two things compete with each other. Jordan talked about oxalates. foods that are high in oxalates would be the things that are even very, very good for you, like your leafy greens are going to be high in oxalates, and these compete for iron absorption and things of this nature. And this is why we run seminars. We're not going to be able to cover all this in a little video here, but yes, there are things that compete with each other. But as a general rule of thumb, take your fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, K1, and K2 with a meal. That's going to have some fat in it. Most of your meals will. Your water-soluble vitamins, which are all your B vitamins and vitamin C, you can take with water with no problem. Your minerals, similarly, right? You could take just with water between meals. Magnesium, Jordan told you, is a good idea to take before bed. Maybe talk a little bit about magnesium's calming effect on the body, and why would that be? Maybe other things that might be a good idea to experiment before bed that have a similar effect.
Yeah, so magnesium has a calming effect on muscle tissue, and as well it has a centrally calming effect, like from the brain, because it acts as an antagonist of receptors that promote wakefulness and promote attention. So it's generally a good idea to take it before bed because it puts you in a state where you're relaxed, your brain is like calmed down, and you can fall asleep more easily. In terms of other minerals to take before bed,
How about glycine as a...
I mean, the minerals and vitamins before bed, magnesium's the big one, but if you want to take other supplements before bed, glycine is an amino acid. It's really good for sleep quality. Taking 3 to 5 grams before bed is a good idea. It acts pretty much actually the same way as magnesium. It acts as an antagonist of the same receptor. It's a little bit more complicated with glycine because it can act as a stimulant or as an inhibitory neurotransmitter depending on the context and time of day. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still a good supplement to try to take before bed.
So these are the types of questions and strategies that when we do private coaching with people, this is where we navigate. If you tell me, hey, I have trouble sleeping, well, there's about a dozen things that we go through with sleeping strategies that we ask you to experiment with, and only one of them is supplementation. There's a whole bunch of other stuff where we talk about, light and circadian rhythms and habits that you're doing before bed and all those things that are well researched. Or you can just read the most recent book by Matthew Walker for yourself, who runs the sleep study clinic in Stanford University. Another question came through about CBD. So why don't you talk about that
Sure.
question?
So the CBD, it's relatively newly studied. There are a lot of studies coming out recently about its benefits and its effects on the body. Specifically, the question was in context of helping sleep and inflammation. There is a lot of research on CBD being calming, and it does this by a couple different mechanisms. Everyone's probably familiar with caffeine, which is an antagonist at a receptor called the adenosine receptor. Adenosine is a neurochemical that will make you feel calmer and more sleepy if it's in high concentrations. Caffeine blocks that effect. CBD has the opposite effect of caffeine at that receptor, so it makes you feel more sleepy, more calm. That's one mechanism. The other mechanism is through a receptor called the 5-HT1A receptor, and that's another receptor that's targeted often by anti-anxiety medications, by sleep medications, and even by antidepressants. It's a receptor that's beneficial. Activating that receptor is beneficial in a lot of these conditions. So those are the two mechanisms by which it can cause this increased sleep efficiency and decreased anxiety. And it can also decrease inflammation by activating the cannabinoid receptors. CB2 in particular does not have this psychoactive effect, and it has a more inflammation killing effect.
So a lot of people that, if you're confused, a lot of people will, on that point, a lot of people will confuse CBD because it's a cannabinoid and associated with cannabis, that it is going to somehow make them high. It actually does the opposite.
It does the opposite.
It's an anti-hallucinogen. So the last question had to do with vitamin A. I believe it had to do with night blindness.
Yeah, night blindness, carotenoids, and night blindness. So there's a lot of research on night blindness and what causes it, and one of the big causes of it is actually by having insufficient amounts of retinol in the retina. Retinol is just another name for vitamin A. The main source of vitamin A in most people's diets is actually through beta carotene. You're consuming way more beta carotene than you are retinol from your diet. This is because plants are high in beta carotene, like green leafy vegetables, pigmented vegetables, things that are red, orange, and yellow. And the retinol that you're getting from your diet is mostly from animal products, which, it would be dairy, but we don't really want to support too much dairy.
You're gonna get it from meat,
liver,
eggs,
egg yolks.
Yeah.
But most people are getting most of their vitamin A from beta carotene from their diet.
Now, why does it matter that they're getting vitamin A as opposed to beta carotene, or does it not matter?
So certain people have polymorphisms. It was BMOC1 that deal with the conversion of beta carotene to vitamin A. Certain people are not as efficient at doing this.
And not to cut Jordan off, but sort of want to just remind everybody the whole reason why we ran the seminar was to explain to you guys why most people, I'm not even going to say some, but most people walking around today actually have a problem with vitamin A absorption because of things like fatty liver disease, low stomach acid, their stomach pH being too high, which is not acidic enough. We talked about poor bile production. We talked about pancreatic enzymes being a problem. The underlying mechanism here isn't just your diet being low in vitamin A. It's the fact that you can actually take that vitamin A and use it correctly. And next week we're going to talk more about polymorphisms that can also hamper this process. So the question that came in had to do with night blindness and what can we do? Well, obviously we need to fix our liver, fix our gallbladders, fix our stomach acid, and all of these things, and then the vitamin A that you do consume can actively be converted more easily. And we'll go into that a little bit more next week. But why don't you talk a little bit about the yellow spot in the eye, what